Our resource leader this morning is Brian Wiebe, and he comes to us after having helped out with some music at 8th Street Mennonite Church. He has dedicated over 25 years to leading nonprofit organizations. For a while, he was head of the Goshen College Music Center, and then Horizon Educational Alliance. They were providing evidence-based improvements to our local educational system. And he also has taught at high school, college level music, and he has served as an orchestra conductor as well. So for 4 decades, he's been involved in one way or another in church music. He has created a lot of preludes and postludes from the piano, directed the church choir, and also 20 years of conducting the Messiah at Christmas time. He and his wife Brenda reside in Goshen. Their 3 adult children live in Denver, Flagstaff, and The Hague, Netherlands. In addition to his interest in music, he's also involved in technology, something to do with IT and computers, and helping businesses become more efficient. We welcome you here, especially because our front office has said in the month of August, we need to be respectful toward our Anabaptist heritage. And it happens that Brian was the one selected to lead the music in Zurich. And he's going to lead us in some of the same hymns that he led there and reminisce a little bit about what it was like. We've had a presentation on Zurich, and a number of us have seen the YouTube video of the whole program. So this is simply going a little deeper. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Vic, and thank you, everybody, for inviting me. Just a couple of clarifications. I did not select or lead all the music at Zurich, but we had a separate hymn sing for everyone who loves to sing, and I 100% led that, and I'll tell you about that. I was at the service. I was one of the last people to get into the Grossmünster, and then thousands didn't get in. It was such a popular gathering. When Vic called me about 3 months ago, I happily said yes to sharing a little bit about what we did at 2 p.m. In Zurich on May 29. I told him that I am assigned certain Sundays where I cover all the music at 8th Street, but I said it's no problem. Our pastors, 13, 15, 17 minutes max on the sermon. We're done by 10:35. I'll meet you at about 10:40. And wouldn't you know it, today, the sermon was on Revelation 2 and 3, where letters to all 7 churches. So Janine Birchie Johnson, the worship leader, read the entire chapters. So we heard the message to all 7 churches. And then the pastor did something really uncharacteristic. I didn't time it, but surely it was 25 minutes, maybe 10 minutes longer than normal. I won't tell you if it was Brenda or Julia, but one of them just really took it home with a long sermon. I still had to play the prelude, which I had composed for the service. The hymn that I chose fit perfectly. I had to do that. I couldn't really shorten it. And I got out really late and headed up 8th Street, and sure enough, the street is closed, right? You've seen that, right? 8th Street is closed. Run over to Main. I'm behind an ambulance. And I said, maybe just turn on your lights and breakneck to the hospital. No, drove the speed limit. So I made it by 3 after. I'm so sorry, but it's fun to hear your Sunday school or your gathering time. I certainly appreciate now having September 9 ice cream on my calendar, so I'll try to join you. So it was a blast being in Zurich for that one day. My siblings and I have an older sister, younger sister. We said, we gotta go. My parents had just passed away in the 18 months before that. I guess the about 2 years before that. Leonard Wiebe was a longtime pastor, and Joanne Wiebe, longtime lover of music. And so my siblings and I and a couple spouses said, we gotta go. So we spent 3.5 weeks in Europe, and the culmination of it was to be in Switzerland, in Zurich. And I appreciate the invitation to lead that. John Roth, he was organizing all of it, and so he asked, and so I said I'd be delighted to. And just like teaching Sunday school, like about half the gain is just that you get to study a subject that you hopefully love, right? And you learn a lot by doing it. So I knew a fair bit about Anabaptist history. I had come out from Bethel College in Kansas. That was my college. Came out to AMBS in 1983 and took the Anabaptist history course with C.J. Dick. You've heard of him, right? Kind of famous. So I had studied that and had always appreciated it. And so to dive into the hymns. So what we did was in Zurich at 2 p.m. on May 29, we got through 500 years of singing with 22 hymns in 75 minutes. And it was just packed for those 75 minutes. Now, we don't have that much, but I do want to sing with you. I want to share with you a little bit of what I chose. And same goals that I had for them in Zurich. We packed the room, people from almost all continents, and we sang together. The goals were to have fun together, singing, to learn a little bit more about hymnody, this thing where text and tune come together, where poetry and melody, rhythm, harmony all gather in one hymn, to learn a little bit more about that. And in the spirit of that, we're going to look at some of the fine print in some of these hymns. At the bottom of every hymn, there's a little fine print, right? We're going to look a bit at that. And then the last goal I had for them and for me was to recognize the source of strength that hymnody is. Not every denomination probably appreciates it as much as the Anabaptists and the Mennonites, but we value hymnody, and I just love that it is still going. It's still happening. And so I want you to encourage your local hymn writer, whether that be Lee Danglers, who sometimes writes music, and Adam Tice, who's actually famous in the hymn world. And I hope I have a chance to say a little bit about that. Toward that end, Vic, what time do I have to be done? You said about 12:50? No, wait. Oh, 11:45. Is that right?
Let's go to 12.
Well, I won't take that much time, but I appreciate a few extra minutes because you're usually done by 11:45, right? And I won't be offended if you stand up and walk out. Turn to hymn number 797. If you don't have a hymn book, there are extra ones here, and Vic could help you get one. 797, and it should say, "We are people of God's peace." Could I hear an amen that 797 is "We are people of God's peace"? We did not have hymn books there, so I had to get copyright material, and then I printed these booklets, and we just kind of went one through the next. But you're going to have these hymns. So 797, I'm going to give us our pitches, and I'm going to lead us 4-part a cappella. We're going to see what this class is made of. Do you want to tell you what? There, it was a flat floor, and I just stood on a chair so you could see me. So I'm going to have you stand, and I'm going to stand on a chair. And then it's no acrobat. You'd rather sit, or you don't want me to stand on a chair? It's kind of both. Okay, okay. I'll conduct you. We stood, but that's okay. Are we standing? Standing. And this is the eyes into it. You know what? That's the wrong one. 797. It's sorry, I'm wrong. We are people of God's peace. And we are people of God's peace. Love unites and strength and song. It is now great. Son, God, good song, boy. A new covenant of peace, all together. Verse 2, and we are heralds of God's King, you read song, and by grace and word of peace, reign and redeem. No other than prevail, stood still leader, us by the Holy Spirit, our God is working through. Sing verse 4. And we are servants of God's King, to bring and choosing peace we faithfully, our Savior. Jesus, Christ, our Prince of Peace, good things will be us. Christ our Lord is our defense, Christ will never be. Okay, so you can imagine how fun that was, right? Time started, I made no opening comments. I blew a pitch, I held my hand up, and they sang in beautiful four-part harmony. The room was packed. There was no carpet in the room. There were no padded chairs. So the acoustic was lively, right? You can imagine that. So we finished all 4 verses, and I gave them a welcome. And then I said, let's look at, because it's one of the things we're going to do, let's look at the fine print. So go to the bottom of that same hymn, 797. And appropriately, you would see the first comments under text based on Menno Simons, present day Netherlands. So the text is based on that. And look at the title where that text came from, Reply to False Accusations. There was some falsehood being preached, and he attacked it, and he put it into this writing. Now, after that, you see that David Augsburger, stanzas 1, 3, and 4, some of you would have undoubtedly known David Augsburger. 1978, he did those verses, and then an adaptation by Esther Bergen from Canada. Another Mennonite, probably based on the last name, 1990, stanza 2, versus the Mennonite Worship and Song Committee, and they finalized that in 2017 Mennonite World Conference. So it took a lot to put that text together, right? Menno Simons wrote it, and then some people put it together. How do we kind of know that, wow, that's a good Anabaptist hymn, good text? Do you see how many times the word peace shows up? And already back then, the Anabaptists were thinking, no, they made a mistake or two and got violent, but they said, we're not going to do that. And Menno Simons was writing about that. The next hymn, we turn to page, I sing with exultation, number 444, 444. I sing with exultation. This hymn I chose because Felix Mons wrote the text. So you see it again at the bottom, the fine print at the bottom. It's pretty small. I should have said, hey, everyone bring magnifying glasses if that's helpful. But we'd probably have Bayer trifocals that can help us. Felix Mons, present day Switzerland. And sure enough, that's right where we were. We were in Switzerland. We were in Zurich, Switzerland, and that's where he was. He might have been hiding in the caves when he wrote this because he did go into hiding a bit, but he was close to Zurich. Now, I reminded them that we were just steps away from the Lamont River, where he ultimately was the first martyr. He was drowned with hands and feet tied, thrown into the Lamont River in 1527, very early in the year. He was baptized 2 years before then. That's what we were celebrating, right? The year 1525, now we're in 2025. He was baptized in his home, at his mother's home, and was it George Blaurock that did the baptizing? I think that was right, several of them. And so 1525 baptized, goes into hiding some, and is kind of being pursued. And look at what year he wrote this, 1526, right in the middle. Now, that hymn he wrote, and then a year later he was drowned. You see some other Mennonite names there, Marion Wenger, the Mennonite hymnal. Before that, you see the Ausbund, 1583. What I think is interesting is the Ausbund. We've heard of the Ausbund, right? It's the Amish that still use it. And because of that, it's the longest used hymn book in the Christian tradition. Crazy. The Ausbund is, because usually we're always getting new hymn books, right? 1992, now we had another new one, but the Amish have kept using the Ausbund. So it was finalized kind of in 1583, and this hymn made it in here. Now, how many verses are there in this one? 4. That's kind of true. But actually, Felix Mons wrote 18 verses. So I told the group, I'm going to hand out a sheet, all 18 verses, and this will fill the rest of our time. And that's all the planning I really could do. No, I didn't do that. We just sang the 4 verses, but he wrote 18 verses for this hymn. You could look those up if you want. Last thing I'll say, this text pairs well with this tune. Okay, it does. It's going to work. But look at when the music was written, the final line in the fine print, not till 1540. Over 20 years after Felix Mons wrote the text. That means it was paired with some other hymn early, and then later it must have gotten paired with this. And I'm going to tell you one trick that I bet not more than 10% of you know, and if you do, it's like quite an astute class. But if you look under the title, I sing with exultation. And now look at Nun wenn ihr hören sagen, sorry about my German, and then look at those numbers. 75757676. Do I have more than 10% that knows what that is? What is that? Oh my goodness. Oh, we're at 14% based on my calculations. Vic called me an IT expert, by the way. I don't do anything with IT. I just lead organizations towards health and vision and that, but I don't do IT, but I still know enough math to say you're over 10%. 75757676 just means this. This is the number of syllables in the text. You'll know this now forever because look, you can kind of watch the text and watch my fingers. I sing with exultation, 7, right? All my heart's delight, 5. Is God who brings salvation, 7, frees from death's dread might, 5. Now we're going to have a 7-6. I praise you, Christ of heaven, who ever shall endure, right? Who takes away my sorrow, keeps me safe and secure. So the price of coming to class, whatever you paid to come to class today, it's worth it, right? You just learned something. Now I hope they don't charge here, but so let's sing this. It's a little trickier. So I'll join you at the piano and let's stay seated. I sing with exultation, Felix Mons, and a hymn that was used for this.
Marion Wenger, a member of this class.
Wow, that is the Marion Wenger. Right on. Okay, what a close connection. That's awesome. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Turn to hymn number 402, 402. Rejoice, rejoice evermore. If you look at the text, look at the fine print, you see that this was written by Balthasar Hubmaier. You have to know a few things about Anabaptist history to run into his name. It's not quite as common as Menno Simons and Felix Mons. But Balthasar Hubmaier was an associate of them. He was a friend of theirs and kind of a mentor. And he was not, he gradually came over to Anabaptist ideas, what was emerging as Anabaptist ideas. And these people would talk with him. And it's interesting to me because he wrote this in 1520, and it is very much an Anabaptist text. But really, he did not join as quickly. He became baptized just shortly after the others in 1525, later that year. And then he was also martyred. So that's Balthasar Hubmaier. Now, you see a translation to Ruth Naylor. She's from Bluffton, Ohio. My parents knew her. She was part of their first church in Fort Wayne in 1960. They called her Bunny. Some people still call her Bunny. Bunny Naylor. Does anyone know that? You could go up to her and say, "Hello, Bunny." And she'd say, "How did you know that?" But Ruth Naylor. So she would have done some of the text work. The music is interesting. Harmonia Sacra, an arrangement by Alice Parker. I want to say a little bit more about Alice, but I'm going to wait for a later hymn. But isn't that interesting? So now we've taken an Anabaptist text and we've paired it with something from the 1800s, the Harmonia Sacra, and then Alice Parker, who many of you know. She loves the Mennonites, and she and Mary Oyer were very close friends, and she was here many times. She arranged the hymn. So you're going to hear a more modern tune with still that Anabaptist text written in the 1500s. Let's sing the first verse and the last verse. Forgive me on those missed notes. I was too busy practicing my prelude and postlude and all the other things. I didn't look at that one enough. You sang very well. Thank you. 392 was the next one we looked at. And over time, we're going to get texts and tunes that were written much more recently. And so we will have a chance to look at those. This one, "The Church of Christ Cannot Be Bound," hymnal 392. A fine print, again, if you go to the bottom, the text is from Adam Tice. And many of us know him. He's from our community. It's interesting, Goshen College graduate. There are about, I think, 3 Mennonites and 1 honorary Mennonite who have been selected as the Hymnal Society of North America, Hymnal Society Fellows. It's a distinguished thing to be a fellow. And I'll also say just a little bit more about that later, but he's one of only several. One is Mary Oyer, one is Ken Nofziger, and then Adam. What I think is pretty fun about this, if you look at the text the music, look at the music, African American spiritual. So it came as a spiritual, but it was adapted by Harry Burleigh. I don't know him, but 1940, he was the second fellow of the Hymnal Society ever chosen in 1994. So 1994, in the 60s or 70s, Mary gets chosen to be in this distinguished group of people. And in the 80s or so, Alice Parker gets chosen, Ken Knopfseger even a little later, and then Adam Tice as the 101st fellow. Not many fellows over like 80 years, right? He's one of those. And you either have to be really good at music, tune, or really good at text. And Adam Tice is really good at text. So next time you see him at the Electric Brew or here at church, you say, "You're a fellow with the Hymnal Society." And he'll smile big, and he should. And he has hymns in here, you bet. Sometimes music, but oftentimes text. And this is his text, right? So what he took, he inspired by Menno Simons. Again, it says true evangelical faith. Why I do not cease teaching and writing, 1539. And then Adam Tice took that. So read a verse, just read a verse here. See if you can pick up on what makes this an Anabaptist text. You know, it's talking about true faith will open up the door and step into the street. True service will seek out the poor and ask them to wash their feet. Verse 4, if what we have we freely share to meet our neighbor's need, then we extend the Spirit's care through every selfless deed. It's just some amazing text writing that he's done over many hymns. GIA is the publisher out of Chicago that does a lot of his stuff, but we have a lot in our hymn book. And Adam, to be chosen as a fellow, like when he's still in his, I don't know, how old is he, Kevin? He's in his 30s or 40s. And just really young. It's quite impressive. So way to go, Adam. Way to go, Goshen College. And AMBS, right on. Exactly. Composer, music. Oh, wow. Text writer than tune composer. No, thank you. This is so helpful. Please interrupt. Keep interrupting. Yes, Kevin. And he had a lot of hymns, but the committee selected hymns blindly. Without knowing who it was. Yeah. How many? Oh my goodness. A lot, yeah. The process. Yeah, very fair. Isn't that great? That's really fun to hear. Adam, yeah, and on the hymn book, probably. Some of his. That's a The precursor was 1564, where they started to collect some of these hymns that had been written. So they started to put together some of these hymns that had been written in the decades before, 1564. And then the full first Ausbund came out in 1583, like 60 years after Felix Manz, but they started to assemble them. What I think is fun here is if you look at the bottom, this is Martin Luther. He wrote this, and it's his famous hymn, Ein Festeburg, right? But we Anabaptists, it's like, we'll take the tune. We kind of like that tune, but we're going to do our own words. And so that's what they've done. Michael Schneider, they took his text. We're not going to sing it, but just in case you don't know it, I'll play you two measures. Know that. You want to sing it? Okay, here we go. One verse. And it's quite rhythmic, right? Go Martin Luther. How cool that he would write this tune. And here's Oh God. And Oh God, be Ein Festeburg. Like you have to think they were pretty musically competent, right? That's not easy. The rhythm of it just kind of skates right through some tricky syncopation. You remember Martin Luther King kind of starting the whole movement. Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King. That's the name I say more often these days. Martin Luther starting this in 1517. How many theses and ideas did he have? How many were there? 95. He pasted up there. So he was very active. And I would guess the Anabaptists in Switzerland were hearing about what was going on up in Netherlands. I think Netherlands and Germany, yeah. But there was, Menno Simons was in present-day Netherlands. So that point. Okay, so I want to take you to, we're going to wrap up with three other hymns that it won't take too long, but go to page hymn 515, 515. So I want to take you to three more current hymns. And so we're going to be in the 1700s. And Christopher Dock is a name we know, right? There's a high school named after Christopher Dock in Pennsylvania. And so you can see that Christopher Dock wrote this text in 1770. So that's 250 years essentially after Felix Manz was the first martyr, quite a bit later. And then Alice Parker in 1962, she wrote some text there. Now, Alice Parker, I like her for like a lot of reasons. One is that she wrote this in my birth year, so I'm 1962. Okay, forget that. But when I was 7, I was in New York City. My father went to Union Theological for another degree, and I got lucky to be at Riverside Church there in Manhattan, New York. And who was the Sunday school music teacher other than Alice Parker? I didn't know that she was famous at the time, but my mom told me, yes, Alice Parker was your Sunday school music teacher. And then years later, she would come to Goshen, and I got to meet her because I was at the music center then. So sometimes I was in charge of hosting Alice. I love the story that in July 1961, the Mennonites asked her to come because she was a hymn expert, and they invited her to Laurelville, right? Church camp. That's where the story was that she wrote about, that she said it was time for grace, and someone said the grace before the meal, and then someone blew a pitch pipe and sang the first note, and on note 2, everyone in the dining hall was singing in 4-part harmony in July 1961. And she said that changed the way I thought about what is possible for congregational singing. Isn't that wild? And then she started this many decade relationship with the Mennonites. She passed away on Christmas Eve, and it would have been just a couple weeks, a couple years ago, and just right before Mary Oyer passed away too. One of them making it to 100, and I think the other one making it to 99. Long friends. Don't hold me to that. I'm not sure of her age, but so I think of Alice Parker as an honorary Mennonite. I think she loved that. So here you have a Christopher Dock text, and the music. Alice Parker helped with both translation and the song. And let's sing a verse of this. "O little children, gather." Just 2 more. Hymn number 496. So this is about 120 years after Christopher Dock wrote that text, right? So now we're into the next century. We're in the 1890s. "I Owe the Lord a Morning Song." And Amos Herr wrote both the text and the tune. Amos Herr was a farmer from Pennsylvania. And in January of that year, there was a really significant blizzard in his community. And there was no way he was going to get to church. It was just impossible. Blizzard, I don't even know if they had church. But Amos Herr knew he wasn't going to be able to go. So he stayed home and he wrote a hymn. How cool is that? The next time you're not able to get to church, just write a hymn. Just get out your pencil, a little staff paper. He wrote the music. He wrote the text. And as far as I know, it's the only hymn he wrote. I guess the weather was better after that. I don't know. But this "I Owe the Lord a Morning Song," you know this one, right? We can sing this a cappella. There's your pitch. Dum, pom, pom, pom. I owe the Lord. And da. I owe the One more verse 2. God has been saved. Now, Holy Spirit, on thy breath, In your beautiful, right? Yes. It's so there's a connection, a relative. Yeah. Amos Early. Oh, really? Oh my goodness. Now, remember I said there are some numbers under some hymns? It's not all hymns that have that, but there's always a name for the text. It's usually one word, couple words, and this one is called gratitude. And so numbers, how many syllables, they didn't worry about that on this one, or maybe it doesn't align with others that you can mix and match. That's the genius of the members. Common meter, CM, exactly. I owe the Lord a morning song of gratitude and praise for the kind mercy freely shown in lengthening out my days. 8686. Yeah, common meter. Thank you very much. Wow, astute was the word I used. Astute class. Thank you very much. So this one's his gratitude, and the text fits with that, right? He's just really grateful. One more hymn, but what I'll say, we'll close with this. We'll do the next one. I can tell to you right now, 776, Teach Me Thy Truth, with the text name of Goshen and CM. Our brother just shared with us, yes, there are no numbers, but CM common meter. So I bet it's an 8686. From sin, set me free. 8686. How cool. We could actually take the text of the last hymn and put it with the tune of this hymn. Do you want to try that? No, I'm just kidding. That's that would be a challenge. Next time I come, we'll try out some adventurous things. But teach me thy truth. So about 50 years after Amos Hur, then, as I understand it, and some of you knew these people, but I understand it that Edith Whitmer, the home economics teacher who's listed here, she wrote the text. And then she went to her colleague, if I understand it correctly, Walter Yoder, who some of you know, some people are related to that family. And Walter wrote that, and he chose the tune name Goshen, probably because he loved the town of Goshen and the college of Goshen. So in Switzerland, I gave greetings on behalf of all of you from Goshen. We give you greetings to many people there who love to sing. The only other thing I'll say is at the end, we, of course, had to do 606, 118, 70, whatever it is now. We did that, but the Sunday before May 29, our family was at a church in Bern, Switzerland. And the EMU choir was actually singing because they did a tour and the EMU choir sounded great. And we opened with Praise God from whom all blessings flow. And I noticed that the people from Switzerland and Germany, there were some German guests, they used their hymn books, right? We didn't because we know it, right? 606, but they did. Then we go through the whole service, and it was a beautiful service. Sermon was amazing, and this hymn singing, it was a really great acoustic church. And we get to the end, and they said, we'll sing one more hymn, and it was called Ehre sei Gott in der Höhe. It's this one. And this was the Sunday before May 17. I had my whole plan. We were going to get through 500 years in 75 minutes with 21 hymns. We made it 22 hymns because they sang this, and I said, we have to find a way to use that hymn. We all used the hymn book. They didn't use the hymn book, and it is their 606. It just is their 606 with more rubato and feeling than our kind of march and national anthem. And so if you want to see this one, come up and see it. I've also thought that it would be fun to do the full hymn sing here in Goshen, maybe in Wreath or in College Church. And then we could because all the other hymns I had from Voices Together, an amazing hymn book, but I added this one beautiful German hymn, and we could sing that then too. But we'd save that for another time if we do that. So it has been delightful to be here. I cannot believe you're all still here. There were other parts to it. We sang some of the favorite hymns that were sung at Mennonite World Conferences, like the French, Praise, I Will Praise You, Lord, The God Loves All His Many People from Africa. We did that, but we won't get to those today. But we will end with Teach Me Thy Truth, and let's do verses 1 and 4 and Stand if you like.
Can you give those comments to the people in Zurich?
Yeah, all those comments. We fit those in.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you being with us.
You're welcome. And there are a couple copies of the Grossmünster, the service. If you have not seen one of these, this is really interesting, the service they had. You can see that online, so you watched in person. Okay, go in peace.